Thanks, Mark. Okay, thanks for staying through to the end for the last slot. This is the first time I've given this particular talk. It's an amalgam of some of the teaching that we do at De Montfort. I'm part of the cybersecurity group there, and my particular interest is in security web applications, but I've been doing a lot about pen testing recently, the last 10 years or so, and incident response coming out of that, but I'll talk more about what we do later. So, incident response. You have an incident, a cybersecurity incident, who are you going to call? Also known as dealing with a data breach. And if you've ever watched data flowing out of a data center off to pastures new and foreign, then it really is like a tap being turned on and just pouring. Followed by the joy of SOCs. No one old enough to understand the pun? Okay. SOCs. So that's a security operations center. Talk more about those later, but 10 years ago, I don't think they existed. 5 years ago, they were still fairly uncommon. Now, there's so many being set up, there are so many people desperate for staff who know how to work in this field, but they're very few and far between. As Mark said, I'm Clint of Ingrams. There's the LinkedIn talk, so I'll be interested to hear what you hear about this, because it is a new talk. So, and if I get feedback straight away, then I can tweak it and then put it in some more CFPs that are running out next week. Okay, so, and this is very much an introduction level. Who's heard of a SOC? Did you know what it stood for before I put the slide up? Good, all right. Information response? Incident response, sorry? A few? Okay. Been involved? Sad to hear it. So, incident response is what you need when everything else has failed, basically. And it's often your last line of last resort. So, some of this I borrowed from module that I co-teach, incident response and pen testing, host-based pen testing. Some has come from a workshop a friend of mine gives for Airbus. Some of it comes from another friend of mine who runs a SOC, and just general talking to people in the field and observing. And I've never done an incident response team, but I've certainly sat in and watched them for little bits and seen what they do. So, scenario, you are a corporate lead DevOps. You manage a corporate network, which is a complicated infrastructure. You've got different subnets. You've got things like corporate enterprise, research, you've got manufacturing. And someone rings you and says you've got a potential ongoing data breach. Do you know what a data breach is? That's the first one. The next comment made is corporate classified data has been found on some cloud-based systems. Sounds good? We found phishing emails in multiple user inboxes. That's ringing a lot of warning bells. It implies you've got physical damage in there, possibly on your industrial process control. It implies you've got some loss of intellectual property right to your organisation. There are some companies, they lose their IP and they're out of business. Loss of data. If your database is being taken off somewhere, then you've got issues with GDPR and things like that. Loss of reputation, corporate loss of reputation, and your loss of reputation leads to your loss of job and your loss of your career. And this does happen, unfortunately. Depends on the old employer, but generally that's really not good news. How are you going to recover? It's not necessarily the end of the world, because you don't need to panic. you move up a gear and into game mode. What are you going to do first? Just 30 seconds to read those, and then I'll ask you to put your hands up. Number one, you're going to shut down your internet access first. Who would do that? Good. Really shouldn't be doing that. Power down servers, power down effective servers. Anyone will go for that? You're just not being brave and putting your hands up, but bit of commitment. Who would power down any servers? Good. Execute cyber incident response plan. Not bad. There's no brief your board. Brief your executive board. You don't know anything yet. They will be pissed. Sorry, they will be cross that they haven't heard about it from the first moment. But you've got nothing to tell them. Why keep them awake unnecessarily? They can't help. They can't do anything. Validate the phone call? Yeah, that's what I do. Or you're going to start reviewing network logs? Not yet. You don't know anything about the incident yet. All you know is you've got some potential problems. Who called you? GCHQ do a lot of monitoring. It could actually be them. That's quite hard to validate.
Someone calls you, what's the technique in order to validate who they are?
Well, first thing you need to look to see is actually run you. Try ringing them back. GCHQ do have an NCSC, you've heard of them? National Cybersecurity Centre. They do have contacts where you can ring and validate stuff. It could be that you're actually paying for a SOC to monitor your networks and traffic. It could be a colleague winding you up. Because that never happens, does it? Has that happened to anyone? I did hear one case. Yeah. And a disciplinary was involved. Or it could be a client ringing you and saying, I've noticed something dodgy going on your network. So you do need to check on that first. Every situation is different. There's no right and wrong thing to do there. If it's your colleagues, you know how to deal with that, hopefully. If it's a client, you need to ring back and double check and see what they've got. So you open your cyber incident response plan, don't you? Also known as a playbook or game plan, which is, on definition, a systematic and documented method of approaching and managing situations resulting from an IT security incident or data breach. What's the difference between an incident and a breach?
Someone getting into your system and an incident where something's happened.
Yeah. An incident is where someone's actually broken something or done some damage or... I mean, there's a possibly apocryphal story about a German iron foundry being taken offline because their safety systems were basically all digital and they were overridden and trashed, and then the furnaces went to the point of setting fire to the iron and the whole. But either the German government has actually squashed the whole thing, or it didn't happen. Anyway, either's possible. So a data breach is where you're actually losing data. Okay. This cyber incident response plan, your CERT, is not the same as these security policies. All right, those are much more low-level, everyday things like how do you manage passwords and how do you manage your, social media access and things like that. I do get that question. Is this the same as? No, it's a different document. CERT contains a well thought out and well prepared set of instructions of what to do. So I was talking to someone at lunchtime who said yes to most of these, but does your organisation have a written plan? Anyone? 1, 2, 3. Yours certainly does. Yeah. Do you know where it is? If someone rang you at your desk, would you be able to put your hands on it straight away? Good. Is it up to date? Are you sure it's up to date? Has it got names in it? Has it got phone numbers? Because I've seen SERPs where they've got names and phone numbers in it, but that person left the company 3 weeks ago. You know, so these things they need to be living, working documents. Having it on your desktop or having it literally on your top of your desk and things is good because you can then see it. But you need to make sure that contact details and the steps you're going to go through are actually all current. So maybe you don't have it locally, but you have it somewhere shared and controlled and updated regularly. So you should know which staff you've got and what their position in your organisation is going to be, and how your organisation is prepared generally. So I'll come back to that in a minute. How do you go about identifying the kind of incident? What reporting mechanisms have you got that you can look up that your cert mentions? You can go and check to see whether you've got anything going on. And where do you look for them? If you have got a breach, what are your plans to contain it? If you have got a breach, what are you going to do? Are you going to turn the servers off? Are you going to turn off internet access? What's the bad thing about just turning off internet access?
Lose internet access.
You lose internet access, yeah. You might be, I was going to say, you're trading. You know, your business goes, you're not online and your business is down.
Something that don't want the people to know that you are onto them, so it's easier to get them. And so turning things off and taking off internet connections probably scare them away, so I like to leave them in.
Yeah, good. Didn't hear what Paul said. If you've got someone who's actually taking data from your servers or is actually online to your servers and you switch the server off, they will guess that you are onto them, which then means it makes it much harder for you to backtrack them. And because part of what we need to do is to find out who's doing this to you and see if you can figure out why, what their overall aim is. Problem eradication. So if you've found malware, do you just delete it or do you just leave it there? Yeah. Maybe it depends what type of malware, maybe it depends on the server that it's on. If it's on an email server, can you leave it there and just not use that email server for the time being? And so those kind of things. And that should all be stuff that you've actually sat in very long, boring meetings and actually written down. So you've got a step-by-step process to go through. What data recovery options have you got? Have you got backups of your databases? It's all right, that's a question for my undergraduates. I would hope that no one here would say no to that, please. And all right, and the final one is you need to think about what you're going to learn from any incident, what you can take away from it. And this is a cyclical thing as well, so anything that you learn from here goes back after the incident is over, and you've got to wash up. Goes back into your preparation so that next time you're better prepared. So, brief aside, incident response lifecycle. Has anyone seen this before? I've come across this before. Okay. So the 4 stages: preparation, detection, and containment, and post-incident referred to. This is one of my colleagues' research. She has a PhD in incident response techniques and has been working on this area for at least 10 years. So she graciously gave me permission to use this stuff. I'm not going to go through all her things because this is like a whole term's teaching compressed into about 15 minutes. So it's just highlights. Okay. The preparation that the incident response lifecycle forces you into doing. In the first stage, there's the contact information, but you also need in your document to record what facilities you've got available. And that can be things like what room you're going to use, what phones are available, Are you going to do the investigation work on site, or are you going to do it remotely, or what? And also what hardware and software you've got to use. I mean, hardware, so the obvious software can be a range of stuff. A lot of people will be quite happy with sort of packet sniffers like Wireshark for the analysis. What logs are you keeping? I mean, as developers, you log everything, don't you? Anything going into your server and anything going out of your server, you log it, because if you don't, when you get to this kind of situation, you are an inclined plane wraps helically around a central shaft. Thank you, Big Bang Theory. Right, so what prevention can we do? What prevention processes can we put in place to prevent this kind of thing happening again? Documentation do you need? What kind of details, again, who have you got a SOC you're paying to? Have you got a formal reporting process for when this is all over? What risk assessment have you done? Have you actually analysed the threat out there? Is there an APT, an advanced persistent threat that you're aware of because of what you do for a business? I mean, some of this stuff comes from Airbus, who are quite large. Yeah, the workshop that I borrowed from is written by the cybersecurity architect for Airbus. Okay, so I was saying to him, we were talking to him about all this, and he said, well, at Airbus, we take engines from Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce take their components from smaller companies. Smaller companies use software written by you guys. So you are part of the supply chain. So if you get your software wrong and you're selling a personnel management system into an organisation that makes nuts and bolts, which are then sold into Rolls-Royce to build their engines with, maybe there's a hole there. Maybe all your IT systems are actually interconnected, and someone can break into the software that you've written and bounce off that right the way back up into Airbus. Essentially, Airbus would be pretty peeved if you did. But it has happened. It has happened. You are part of the supply chain, and therefore you are part of the problem. Sorry. If you don't go away thinking about this stuff really carefully, I haven't done this right. And there'll also be a healthy level of paranoia as well, hopefully. Okay. How do we prevent malware? You need a plan for preventing malware. It's not just enough to put firewalls and IPSs and IDSs and things in, and virus checkers and whatever. You need an active program for making sure that malware doesn't get on your system. User awareness and training. You will have security people in your company, hopefully. You will have someone who is actually identified as being more security aware. Maybe they're a pen tester, maybe they're not, maybe they're just a security operations manager or whatever. Their responsibility is to keep you and your team up to date with the latest threats, and also things like, I mentioned password management. You know, what's the weakest link in a company in terms of passwords? It's people. And the first line of defence in most organisations are the security guards and the receptionists, and who are the lowest paid people. So you can go over and award people a pay rise. Okay, so preparation, then you need all that stuff in place. Detection, precursors, you need web logs, and you need to be analysing them. You need understanding threats of attacks. You need to be exchanging people with, exchanging information with other people. Even if you see them as competitors, they are in the same market as you, they will be facing the same threats. I watched a company, the best way to put this, someone I knew was from one company was visiting one of their competitors, and they became aware of a data breach. But they didn't say anything because it was the company's data that was going. It's their competitor's company data that was going. And he said, I told them eventually. Really? That was 15 years ago. I mean, if that happened nowadays, I'd be really worried. The government has a national view of IP as belonging to the nation, so all your company IP doesn't, it's part of the national IP. I say belonging, I mean it's part of the society we live in. And they want to help you protect it and maintain it. They don't want to, that someone can come in and walk away with it. So, threats of attacks, you read constantly. You have someone in your company, the security, whatever, who is constantly reading the threat reports coming out of GCHQ and from the NCSC, a couple of other bodies. But you must be on their mailing lists. You must be downloading the stuff and reading it. And implementing it. Where it makes recommendations, you need to review those and make sure. What other indicators might you have? You may get software alerts. You may get comments out of your IDS and IPS. I've seen people, again, they see these reports and they go, meh. And say, but that's, you need to follow that one up. Those, yeah, they're meh, but that one is kind of, you know, why have you got a huge pile of DHCP requests which are completely anomalous? Where's that coming from? You know, is it someone trying to do something malicious on your network? At the very least, you need to follow that up. So, you know, you need to be reviewing any kind of alerts. Configuration changes. If there's a config change on the system, do you have a record of who made the change? Was it you? Was it one of your colleagues? Or was it someone else remotely who's changing permissions so that they can upload a bit of malware to whatever? Sorry, but you need to be aware of this stuff. You need behavior analysis. You need tools to help you analyze logs. You need tools to analyze events. And synchronization of timing. I mean, you look at logs, and you look at different logs, and you look at activity in that log, and in that log, and in that log, and is it all happening at the same time, in which case we've got a spike. So we need to backtrack on those and actually try and see what's going on there. You need to build up a knowledge base. You need to make notes, and you need to, how you structure that, it's up to you, it will be an internal company thing, but you need some kind of database of everything that you know, and it has to be ongoing. So you're building that constantly. You need research. Obviously search engines, so it can help you keep you up to date. Packet sniffers, Wireshark is a wonderful piece of software. Is there anyone who's never seen it? Who's used it regularly? Yeah, it's awesome. I've never thrown a protocol at it that it hasn't managed to analyse and give me data on. Tried, but it's never let me down yet. And there is other support out there as well. There's people like GCHQ, they run UK CERT. It's part of NCSC now, I think. And they're on the phone, and they will give you advice on what you need to be doing next, or what you could be doing next, or where to go for advice. They may just say you've got someone down the road who's really good, so you could go and ask them. So, and then you need to think about the impact. If you have a data breach, and you've got a data breach of this part of your database, what functional problems will that cause for your company? What impact if you lose confidential information? But it's not just losing confidential information, is it? It's losing integrity as well. So integrity of different parts of your database, integrity of different parts of your business. Also, if you've got a data breach, are your servers still up? Are you losing reputation because your servers are down and they're no longer available? And how can you recover from all this? What would be lovely would be to have a big button that goes reset everything back to, or roll back to a certain stage. How practical is that? Would be nice though, wouldn't it? So you need a checklist. Okay, this comes from, I think this comes out on the NIST. I've given a link to it somewhere, but it's one of the NIST documents. There's a really nice NIST document that's been around for a few years about how to handle a cybersecurity incident, and it's on the reading list. So, there's that first one. Determine whether an incident has actually occurred, or whether it's someone just winding you up. And then you go back through the documents you've already looked at. I mean, you check through your knowledge base. So that was the state of play this morning. Has there been any change now? You know, now that I've had an incident reported. I'm going for time. Okay. So back to the scenario. So that's kind of a snapshot of the kind of things that you need to be aware of. Back to the scenario. So you ring the leader of the CERT, the Computer Emergency Response Team, who you have on standby. They will have a team of IR people. Most organisations will tell you that employing good IR people is really hard. Not very big as a profession yet. There aren't enough people there. If you fancy a career change, that's one way to go. It's only going to grow. It's a massive growth area. This and working in SOCs as well. But doing incident response, it's quite a challenging role. It's one of those jobs where people will either love you or hate you because you haven't fixed their problem for them within the first 30 minutes. Normally they would report to someone like a SOCcing, which may be above your pay grade. So with your senior management, will you notify them when you're going to do this? You tell your CEO? We've now got a bit of evidence maybe that there is something going on. What happens if you're a big public company and your CEO goes on TV and is interviewed and can't answer simple questions like, what's a data breach? Does that ring a bell, by the way? Because there's quite a famous case for this. There was the CEO of TalkTalk, a lady called Dido. It's quite a famous interview. You can find it, it's online. And TalkTalk were hacked. There was a script kiddie in Northern Ireland, 16-year-old lad who used a bit of software called SQL Map, and he just happened to find that the TalkTalk website was really badly written. Okay, and she went on TV and she was asked some fairly straightforward questions and she couldn't answer them. And they lost 60,000 customers overnight. Partly because of the data breach, but partly because of, it was obvious that she wasn't aware of this stuff. I asked a friend of mine who works for a bank, I said, after that interview, I said, did anything change? He said, yeah, we wrote scripts. We now have a bunch of scripts to cover all kind of eventualities that the security team put together, and the CEOs and the other senior exec have access to those. So if there is an incident, we just say, look, you need briefing, read script number 5, and then be prepared. So COO, not just yet, maybe, not until it gets to the first point of the first TV interviews or press interviews. COO? Maybe. Some COOs are technically literate. Some are not quite as technically literate as they think they are. CIO, CTO, probably a CTO, Chief Technology Officer. And there's a good reason for that, come back to in a moment. Do you tell your legal team? I'm thinking about big companies, but just scale this down for where you work. Do you tell the lawyers? They're the ones who will possibly be responsible for any legal actions against the company, but possibly not yet. Shareholders, investors? No.
Definitely not.
No. Not until you have to provide the annual report, unless it's all come out in the press, whatever. ICO, Information Commissioner's Office.
You've got 3 days, haven't you? You have 3 days due to self-report.
I've given you a link to read. It's not always. But what they actually say, what they said was that when GDPR went live last year, they were getting 500 phone calls a week for people saying, oh, I've lost a password. Up to bigger incidents. So what they then qualify that. The ICO is not in the business of fining. They can, and they can send to prison, or they can take you to court, or they can recommend that you're prosecuted, but then their stated aim was not to fine people. They would rather re-educate you and help you find a way through. So the ICO actually say you don't need to tell us unless the data breach is significant and there is a real risk of people's rights being violated. Or material damage, yeah, being able to cause. So you talk to the lawyers on that one, whether you need to tell the ICO, or you can ring them up and ask them. Jerry?
People you're missing off there that you might want to be talking to as well would be your PR company or department or whoever handle that, because they'll often be the people who are teaching you about reputation, damage limitation and stuff like that as well in the public sphere.
True. I know for the bank it was the PR team who worked with the security team to actually generate the briefings. Yeah, thanks. I'll put that in.
And the other one would be your insurers.
Again, I think that goes maybe a little bit further down the line.
Yeah.
So,
Might also need to talk to your social media team.
is that the PR team?
Could be the same team. Could be different team.
Depends how big. Oh, there's one girl in an office, or one lad in an office. Okay, so do we have any useful information to share yet? No, we haven't done any investigations yet, so we'll sit on things. Do we need extra resources? Maybe this is why you tell your CTO, because you want someone who's got authority for budgets, so they can actually bring in extra people. So if you bring in an IR team, they will probably want to use you as a liaison. Yeah? They won't want to be coming in blind. They will want someone on side who actually knows the networks, knows the company, knows the data, understands it and all, and can help them and work with them. By the way, if that is you, it depends how serious the breach is, but it could just take a morning to investigate. It could take a month. And some IR teams will tell you that they don't sleep until the breach is fixed. They sleep at their desks. They just don't go home for a month, basically. I mean, they're talking to the Airbus team recently, and when they do an IR breach like that, the last one took them 5 weeks. And they had a zero home life for some time. Anyway, so team comes in and they start looking through all the stuff that we mentioned earlier, the logs and things. We found unpatched servers. Do you patch your servers? Do you have a document that says how often your servers are going to be patched? Do you have a document that actually you sign to say that you've patched them? Do you have a document? All that kind of stuff. You do that stuff better than I do. But unpatched servers have been found. Malware has been discovered on multiple servers. What are you going to do? You're going to delete it straight off? Or again, that's a judgment call. We've discovered ransomware that on desktops or not executed. Possibly that's linked to the phishing emails. So what can we do about that? Well, the long-term thing is you train your staff not to click on links in emails. Is that ever going to be work? Is that ever going to work?
Not enough.
Sorry?
Not enough.
Not enough. No. I mean, in my place, obviously, there's the different faculties. We have everything from some fairly hardcore engineering through up to art and design. I mean, to glass blowing and things. Those guys are not techie. They will see an email that comes from our IT department and they will click on the link. And they will fill the details in, and it happens about once a term. Usually what happens is that we get blocked by Hotmail or someone, and someone in IT has to ring up Hotmail and say, sorry, it's happened again. And then we get another flurry of emails saying, have you done your training yet? We've got DHCP server with a high number of anomalous requests, so you need to investigate that. It may be completely not a problem, not a threat, not malicious. It could just be you've got a higher number of people bringing in their own devices to work. We can figure out that the main database has been accessed by an unauthorized source. How are you going to know that? We look at the logs. Maybe not just the logs at the database, but maybe the logs of the firewall, maybe the logs. You do log your firewall's traffic, don't you? Okay. If you don't, think about it. And the other thing that will have happened is that they will have taken forensic snapshots of all endpoints. So that means they will go into offices and take a snapshot of every desktop machine They will take a snapshot of every router, server, gateway device, you name it, they will try and capture it, just to check. That's why these investigations can take weeks, because that's a lot of data to trawl through. All right, so that's the preliminary findings, and they'll be reported back to, in a document, to someone on the board, maybe, or someone a bit higher up. And that's maybe a good time when you can go back and say, well, we're going to need extra resources, I need to bring more people in. And you'll find yourselves taking, or companies will take developers away from the day job and they'll become part of the incident response. So, does that happen to anyone?
Huh?
Does that happen to anyone? You've done that? Yeah. Was it fun?
Yep.
Depends on your, well, depends on your point of view. So this is a cyclical process. This will go around several times. So the end game. After some time, you will be able to report that you've removed all your desktop malware. Admin user passwords reset. You need to do that. It's fairly straight on. You need to patch servers. You need to remove server malware. Now we need to notify senior management, and there's the comment that I made about the ICO. That is a judgment call, and the ICO will accept a phone call from you saying, we've had this data breach, do I need to report it? I'll give you the brief outline of the details, do I need to report that? And they'll say, it doesn't sound like it, or yeah, please, we'd like a fuller report. Okay. I know there are companies that have data breaches that don't go anywhere near the ICO office because they're worried about their reputation. But all that happens is that other companies will face the same problems, potentially in the future. Or it might come back to them. This friend of mine that runs a SOC, he goes back to the same company about once or twice a year because they have some known vulnerabilities and they never fix them. So basically he just pre-prints out last year's report with the date changed. And he said they've done a cost-benefit analysis. The amount that it costs them each time to pay for him and to pay for the monitoring and pay for the breaches and cover-ups is actually less than it will cost them to fix the problems, even over like a decade period. I don't know. I'd rather be safe than sorry, but you know, that's I can't possibly comment any further. But so there are people out there. Sorry.
You say remove the server malware there. I kind of come from the school of if you manage to get something on your box, you've got to wipe your box.
Yeah.
Removal is not just removing the folder that you found their stuff in, because how deep does that rabbit hole go really? Can you ever trust that again?
It depends on what the server's doing, what the service is running. But Ken, take the point. But there aren't two incidents that will be the same, unless you've got the same thing popping up each year. But every incident is going to be different. You've got a playbook, you've thought about it, there's guidance for you, but it is only guidance. So at the end of this, you need full analysis of it, every detail that you've found out, and you need a full write-up. Yeah, developers love documentation. You're going to be part of the write-up. Sorry. You need to do the write-up because you need to learn lessons and you need to be able to fix the problems, and you need this process documented. Yeah? If you don't learn the lessons, you're just going to be hit time and time and time again. You need to catch up on sleep. That's serious, that one. Yeah, I know the Airbus team that just go out as a group. They just go and let their head down they go home and sleep, and then they just get together and just let their hair down as a group until the next incident happens, which is usually only a few days. Now would be a really good time to ask for permanent extra resources from whoever the budget manager is. We need extra people because obviously there was a problem there because we weren't on top of it, because basically we were fully stretched and it's just cost us this much. So if you'd have actually paid for an extra person, we might not have paid that out. Is a starting point for your argument, and also probably a good time to ask for a salary increase. And again, it's perfectly valid. I've seen that done. I've heard of that. No, sorry, I've heard of that happening. So, how do you actually go about analysing data breach? How much time have I got? A few minutes. We're down to 10 minutes, yeah?
10 minutes.
Okay. I've got some slides on the cyber kill chain, but I'll skip those. So, analysing, we need to map the threat landscape. And you do that as part of the documentation process that I was talking about earlier. You need to draw out what the particular threat map landscape is for your organisation. Yeah? I mean, down here we've got infrastructure. Maybe infrastructure isn't a threat as far as you're concerned for your organisation. But people, human resources, people certainly are. 50% of all data breaches are caused by members of your company. It used to be 70%. It's dropped to 50% because outside threats have got bigger, not because there are fewer incidents within. And not all the incidents are malicious. You know, sometimes with people on any security system, anyone who works in security will tell you that if you add security after you've designed and put the systems into place, it's going to be lumpy, it's going to get in the way, and your employees will find a way around it. So if you bring in a password change where someone has to have a new password every month, they're going to write it down. And on a post-it, which they put under the keyboard because that's completely secure. Yeah? Maybe you need people in to train. Maybe you need to get someone in from outside to actually do that kind of training. Maybe we were going for a system where the IT department insisted on all staff changing the passwords every 3 months because they thought that was the thing to do. And I argued with them for weeks, and then finally I sent them the latest guidelines from GCHQ, which basically said if you do this, you make the problem worse. And so they backed off. But we've had pen tests since then, and that's one of the things that the external pen test company pick up on. You don't do regular password changes. Well, no. You change after an incident. You don't change regularly because that doesn't prevent incidents necessarily. So you need something like that, a document where you capture the whole of your infrastructure. If you need to get a pen test company in to actually map your hardware, software, I've had that happen at work. They found 800 servers we'd forgotten about. Well, you know, people do a research project and there's money comes in from somewhere outside to actually pay for the research and pay for the machine, and then the researcher gets a PhD and they go off to somewhere else, and we've got a contract to actually keep the server up and running so the data that they've discovered is still available. And then the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. We've got a server we've been running for ESA, the European Space Agency, for at least 20 years, and we've done no research on that server for 10 years. But we are obliged to keep it up. Anyway, so we need threat actors. You need to identify the attack vectors that came in. You need to understand the timeline of the attack, and you need to analyse the actions, motivations of the attacker. I won't have time to talk about the cyber kill chain, but there is quite an old technique called cyber kill chain which will talk you through the steps. Maybe just a quick slide. Threat actors are individuals or groups that can actually attack you, either internally or externally. Your analysis and thinking about this should be predicated on what their possible capabilities are. Just because they're 14 doesn't mean they're not going to find a way into your system. Yeah. What their intentions are. You know, are they after your data? Have they got any history? I couldn't not do a tool like this without that slide picture, because we all know that's what a hacker looks like, yeah? Employees, though, is the #1 problem in most organisations. External threats, hacktivists, really small. Really, really small percentage. Nation state, actually quite large.
Yep.
One didn't say that. There are others. I'm not mentioning any names. But yeah, those are the two that everyone thinks about. All right, stop shouting names. It's going online, remember. Okay, so people who just hack socially, just for the hell of it, fun, because they've got something to prove, or not. Cyber terrorists and cyber fighters. And your corporations, your people you're in business with. I've sat in front of MDs and they've told me that no one is interested in their data. You know, what? Well, your competitors are. They want to know your supply list and then they want to know your customer list. And if that's not data, then what is? You know, in fact, that guy only started to take this stuff seriously when he was hacked, or actually when he found that a factory at the back end of China was making his products for him without his knowledge and selling them for a third the price. Much lower quality build, but you know. So you need to work out what attack vectors were used and what the end point was, and that will come from the analysis that the IR team will do. Can you identify how the attack was carried out? Again, part of the IR work, but with your help. Deception. Social engineering. Don't underrate it. It's really good fun. If you want a good summary of how social engineers work, there are several books out now, Mitnick's books and things, but there's one called Hacking the Human by Ian Mann, which is an excellent read, and he's one of our visiting profs as well, but I don't get anything through his books. All right, so I'm going to skip the next few slides about SOCcing. Okay, so a SOC. Last few slides about SOC, Security Operations Center. I do like this picture because there's so many things wrong with it. Thought this through with a couple of people. We've got this wall of screens. No one's paying them any attention. Maybe they don't need to. You know? You've got unlocked machines in the foreground. You would never do that, would you? You'd never get up and walk away from your machine and leave it unlocked. Chris pointed out yesterday that they're not wearing ID badges in there, so how do they get in and out? Maybe their IDs are on their waistband. The one that always gets me, though, is there's always a world map. It's always a map of the world. And talking to my friend, he's got a world map. It's 4 screens. And I said, honeypots? He said, yeah. Any useful information from that? No. That's for visitors, right? Yeah. I said, and for the people that pay the bills, because they like to see it as well. But his setup, they've got one long room, the IR team are at one end and the SOC team at the other, so they work together very closely. But SOC is about monitoring in advance, so it's not preventative, but it is keeping an eye on things. And so if there is an attack, then the SOC team and the IR team will work together. I've seen SOC teams now that have developers as part of the team. They're using developers to make mashups of the tools that they're using or to improve the tools and enhance the tools. A lot of these tools that they use are open source, or they're self-written ones. If you want to write stuff like that, Python is probably the way to go as a language. Sorry, PHP. So a SOC is a nucleus of all information security operations. You have to buy into one. Okay, Amazon, AWS have their equivalent of a SOC. Finished. Oh, you want to go on for 2 minutes? Yeah. All right. Amazon have their equivalent of one, or you can buy into a small one. I mean, I know at least 4 or 5 within 10 miles of where I work in Leicester. And they are appearing regularly, but they can't find people either. You know, it's really hard to. The one in Leamington Spa has got 2 of my graduates in it now, and so we regularly try and take our cybersecurity students down there. We're moving from reactive to proactive by putting in tools to try and prevent, at least detect, and one of the ways of paying back is honeypots, which is why most SOCs and SOC organisations will run a network of honeypots. Anyone play with honeypots?
That's why I said don't cut the internet, because then you could put them in a honeypot.
Yeah, yeah, you can forward through into a. Yeah. Response should be immediate. Most organisations nowadays, if you're told about incident response, it will probably be from a SOC, if you're paying into one. They will coordinate the response, and they just increase visibility of the incidents. Okay, so there's a couple of quotes there. Detect, analyse and respond to cybersecurity incidents, monitoring for anomalous activity. So start with security analysts and engineers, as well as managers who actually know what they're doing. There's a little SOC diagram. People are as important as process and the tech. Like most places, people focus on the tech, but it's process and people. So the documentation that you've prepared in advance there. The people part, we need formal training, we need experience, we need vendor-specific training because some of the software that's used, like Logarithm and Carbon Black, are very specialised and they're really expensive. Has anyone had any experience with any of these? Any of those? Which one? Darktrace. Yeah, I'm told the limit of Darktrace is it will only work with instance to instance. So if you're actually monitoring a lot of servers, then you're continually going from interface to interface. Apart from that, it's brilliant. It's also quite expensive. Does it? Okay. Right. We know the Darktrace company. They're sort of regular visitors. Logarithm. My SOC friend, they're kind of rowing back on that because their licensing has recently changed and it's put it out of the reach of most small companies. Splunk. Splunk is dead simple. Dead simple. It's an analysis tool. It gives you some preventative, but it's more about analysing. So we can do our log analysis using Splunk or Carbon Black. Information sharing, I mean, obviously there's multiple screens, but there's a couple of new ideas which are appearing in SOCs, U-pits and fire pits. The idea is that instead of people sitting in long straight rows, they sit in U-shapes or in circles. And then you can, if you've got an incident, you can project the information down onto a flat surface in front of you. So you can share that way, and so everyone has got control of it. Fire pit is a brand new idea that's just come out of NCSE. I've only heard about that like 2 weeks ago, but the companies are now starting to make this already because it's just such a really useful concept. That's the final takeaway. Basically, if you can say that you're on top of each of these 20 stages, you're fairly well prepared. Right, so I will upload these slides. So I've been at De Montfort for 21 years now. I teach modules in PHP, cybersecurity, and I teach first year computer networks because basically it was my turn. But the PHP's fun. And we have a big research group now. There's some 27 people in it. Our specialism is our industrial control systems and SCADA. So SCADA is the software that interfaces hardware systems. So we're particularly interested in working with National Grid and people like that. So critical national infrastructure, like railway management software, water management software. We do a lot with water, do a lot with electricity, grid. And then we also research into these other areas: privacy, web app security, IR is a big area, and big group on smart systems. Do a lot on authentication systems. So what we are doing at the moment is designing and building a SOC. It's a training SOC for students to learn, and from September, October onwards, we'll be building CPD courses. So keep an eye out if you're interested, and you can come and learn about what a SOC does. Some of the scenarios, the students will be building those, or we'll be building those as well. We have other bits of hardware. There's a cyber range where we can run CTF, capture the flag competitions, red team, blue teaming. There's a shed load more I could talk about, but I'll stop there. Anyone wants to carry on the conversation this evening, then just find me. I hope that was interesting, inspiring, depressing, useful, made you think. Okay, thank you.